Before we begin our peaceful journey into the past tonight, I would love it if you could take a moment to subscribe to this channel and give this video a gentle like if you are enjoying the experience. It truly helps me continue creating these restful stories for all of you. I would also love to hear from you in the comments below. Please share where you're listening from tonight and what time it is in your corner of the world. There is something so wonderfully connecting about knowing we are all here together, sharing this quiet moment across different places and time zones, united in our search for peaceful sleep. Now, let yourself settle deeply into your most comfortable position. Feel the weight of your body sinking into the softness beneath you, as if you are being gently cradled by the earth itself. Notice how the air around you feels cool and soothing against your skin, like the gentle evening breeze that once whispered through medieval castle walls. Let your breathing slow and deepen naturally, just as the rhythm of life slowed in those ancient stone halls when the day's work was finally done. You can almost hear the distant crackling of a warm hearth somewhere far away, its golden light dancing softly against worn tapestries, creating shadows that seem to move like whispered stories from centuries past. Our story tonight begins in the year 1347, in a castle that sits like a tired giant against the rolling hills of what we now call England. The morning mist clings to the stone walls like gossamer threads, and somewhere in the servants' quarters, a young man named Edmund awakens to face another day in his life as the court's newest jester. The wooden floor beneath his straw mattress creaks with the familiar groan that has marked the beginning of every day for the past 3 years. Edmund's life is not filled with the grand adventures that songs might tell of, but rather with the endless, repetitive tasks that make up the daily existence of someone whose job it is to amuse others while his own soul grows quietly weary. The first task of Edmund's day is always the same. He must rise before dawn to prepare his simple costume and practice the same tired routines that the lord of the castle expects to see performed each morning after the morning meal. His motley outfit, a patchwork of faded reds and browns, hangs limply from a wooden peg driven into the stone wall. The bells sewn onto his pointed cap have lost much of their cheerful jingle, producing instead a dull, muffled sound that matches the monotony of his daily existence. Edmund pulls on each piece of clothing with the mechanical precision of someone who has performed this ritual thousands of times, his movements slow and deliberate, like a mill wheel turning endlessly by a sleepy stream. The castle's great hall feels cavernous and cold in the early morning hours, with only the dying embers in the massive fireplace casting occasional flickers of orange light across the stone floor. Edmund's soft-soled shoes make barely a whisper of sound as he walks the length of the hall, counting his steps as he has done every morning for 3 years. 47 steps from the servants' entrance to the dais where he will later perform. The rushes scattered across the floor release their dusty, herb-scented fragrance with each footstep, a mixture of dried lavender, rosemary, and the earthier scent of old straw that has absorbed countless meals, conversations, and the general wear of daily castle life. The kitchen servants are already at work when Edmund arrives to collect his morning portion of bread and weak ale. Their quiet conversations, a gentle murmur that blends with the soft sounds of wooden spoons stirring in iron pots, and the rhythmic thunk of bread being kneaded on worn wooden tables. Martha, the head cook, always saves him a slightly larger piece of bread than what the other servants receive, not out of any particular fondness, but because she understands that a jester who faints from hunger during a performance creates more problems than entertainment. Edmund eats his bread slowly, savoring each bite not because it tastes particularly good, but because eating slowly helps stretch the few moments of relative peace before his day of forced merriment must begin. By the time the Lord and his family have finished their morning meal, Edmund has already rehearsed his 3 standard routines in the empty hall: the juggling sequence with 3 worn leather balls, the silly walk that involves exaggerated limping and arm-waving, and the collection of tired jokes about merchants, traveling priests, and the weather that have been circulating through castle halls for decades. Each routine has been performed so many times that Edmund's body moves through the motions without any conscious thought, leaving his mind free to wander to other things. The way morning light filters through the narrow windows, creating geometric patterns on the floor, or the sound of sparrows nesting in the castle's eaves, their soft chirping a counterpoint to the human activity below. The Lord's children, 2 boys aged 8 and 10, represent Edmund's most challenging audience, not because they are particularly sophisticated in their humor, but because they are easily bored and quick to complain to their father if the morning's entertainment fails to capture their interest. Edmund has learned that the younger boy, Thomas, responds well to physical comedy involving mock falls and exaggerated surprise, while the older boy, Robert, prefers wordplay and simple riddles, though his attention span rarely extends beyond a few minutes. The delicate balance of keeping both children engaged while avoiding any routine that might be deemed inappropriate by their stern tutor, Brother Marcus, requires a level of careful calculation that would exhaust most people before the day has properly begun. The morning performance itself lasts exactly 12 minutes, as timed by the gradual movement of sunlight across a particular stone in the great hall's floor, a measurement Edmund has perfected over months of observation. He begins with the juggling, his hands moving in the familiar pattern, while he recites a simple rhyme about 3 sisters who could not decide which of them should marry the miller's son. The leather balls arc through the air in their predictable paths, occasionally catching the morning light in a way that creates brief shadows dancing across the walls. The sound they make when caught is soft and worn, like distant applause from an audience that lost interest long ago. The silly walk follows, with Edmund adopting the persona of a confused traveler who cannot remember whether he is coming or going, leading to an elaborate pantomime of checking imaginary signs, consulting a non-existent map, and asking directions from invisible passers-by. This routine requires him to move around the entire great hall, his exaggerated gestures filling the vast space, while his mind automatically navigates around the familiar obstacles: the loose stone near the 3rd pillar, the slightly raised threshold by the main entrance, the worn spot in the rushes where countless feet have passed over the centuries. The jokes that conclude each morning performance are perhaps the most challenging part of Edmund's routine, not because they require any particular skill to deliver, but because he must somehow inject fresh enthusiasm into material that has grown stale through endless repetition. The joke about the merchant who sold his shadow, thinking it was a piece of cloth, always receives a polite chuckle from the adults and genuine laughter from the children, though Edmund suspects their amusement comes more from the familiar ritual of the telling than from any inherent humor in the tale itself. After the morning performance concludes, Edmund retreats to a small alcove behind the great hall, where he stores his few personal possessions and attempts to find a few moments of solitude before the afternoon's obligations begin. This narrow space, barely wide enough for a grown man to stretch his arms, has become his sanctuary within the bustling castle environment. The stone walls here are older than those in the main hall, their surface worn smooth by centuries of weather and touch, and they retain a coolness that feels pleasant against his back when he leans against them. The single narrow window in this alcove looks out onto the castle's herb garden, where rows of lavender, thyme, and rosemary grow in neat lines, tended by the castle's aging herbalist, Sister Catherine. The herb garden represents a world of quiet productivity that stands in sharp contrast to Edmund's life of manufactured entertainment. Sister Catherine moves through her garden with the slow, methodical pace of someone who understands that plants grow according to their own schedule, not the demands of human impatience. Edmund often watches her from his window, observing how she examines each plant with gentle attention, pinching dead flowers, pulling weeds with careful precision, and harvesting herbs with movements that seem more like a dance than work. There is something deeply soothing about watching this daily ritual of tending and nurturing, especially when contrasted with his own work of creating momentary amusement that vanishes as quickly as it appears. The midday meal brings Edmund's second major performance of the day, though this one takes place in a different setting and requires a different set of skills. The castle's great hall fills with the various members of the household, knights, servants, visiting merchants, and occasionally traveling pilgrims who have been granted hospitality for the night. The noise level during the midday meal is considerably higher than in the morning, with conversations overlapping, wooden bowls and metal cups clattering against tables, and the general bustle of people moving about the hall. Edmund must pitch his performance to cut through this ambient noise while still maintaining the gentle, non-threatening demeanor expected of a court jester. His midday routine centers around what he privately calls table wandering, moving from group to group within the hall, offering brief moments of entertainment tailored to each particular audience. The knights preferred jokes about cowardly soldiers and incompetent commanders, delivered with just enough edge to feel transgressive without crossing into actual disrespect for military authority. The serving women enjoy gentle teasing about the romantic entanglements of fictional characters, stories that allow them to laugh at the follies of love without feeling personally targeted. The visiting merchants respond well to humor about the absurdities of travel, the unreliability of roads, and the strange customs encountered in distant places. Moving through the hall during the midday meal requires Edmund to read the mood and energy of each group before approaching, a skill that has taken him years to develop and still requires constant attention. Some days the knights are in high spirits, ready to laugh at almost anything, while other days they sit quietly, their minds occupied with concerns about patrol schedules, equipment maintenance, or letters from home. The serving staff's receptiveness to entertainment varies depending on how busy the kitchen has been, how many additional guests have arrived unexpectedly, and whether any of them have received particularly difficult assignments from their supervisors. The challenge of adapting his performance to these shifting moods has taught Edmund to become an acute observer of human behavior, though this skill brings with it a certain melancholy awareness of how often people's public faces differ from their private concerns. He notices when the head groom's usual cheerful demeanor masks worry about a sick horse, when the castle's steward forces laughter while calculating whether the remaining grain stores will last through the winter, and when the lord's wife smiles politely at his jokes while her attention remains focused on a letter that arrived with the morning's messenger. The afternoon hours bring Edmund's most tedious responsibility, providing entertainment for the castle's children during their rest period after the midday meal. This task requires him to moderate his energy level carefully, creating enough engagement to prevent the children from becoming restless and disruptive, while avoiding overstimulation that might interfere with their evening sleep. The children's entertainment takes place in a smaller chamber adjacent to the great hall, where the afternoon light filters through colored glass windows, casting shifting patterns of blue and amber across the stone floor. The stories Edmund tells during these afternoon sessions follow familiar patterns that have been refined through countless repetitions. There is the tale of the clever mouse who outwitted a cat by convincing it that cheese was actually a type of soap, a story that allows for gentle physical comedy as Edmund acts out the mouse's various schemes. The children particularly enjoy the story of the traveling merchant who accidentally traded his horse for a bag of magic beans that turned out to be ordinary beans, but whose adventures trying to make the best of his mistake lead to a series of increasingly absurd situations. These story sessions require Edmund to sit on the floor with the children gathered around him, a position that his aging knees find increasingly uncomfortable as the years pass. The stone floor, even cushioned with woven mats, creates a persistent ache that radiates up through his back by the time each session concludes. Yet there is something genuinely pleasant about the children's unguarded responses to his stories, their laughter free from the social calculations that govern adult reactions to entertainment. When young Thomas becomes completely absorbed in a story about a dragon who cannot remember how to breathe fire, his face lit with genuine curiosity about how the dragon might solve this problem, Edmund experiences brief moments of satisfaction that make the physical discomfort seem worthwhile. The late afternoon period represents the closest thing to free time in Edmund's daily schedule, though even these hours are not entirely his own. He is expected to remain available in case the Lord requires impromptu entertainment for unexpected visitors, and he must also use this time to maintain his costume, practice new routines, and prepare for the evening's performance. The castle's laundresses allow him to wash his clothing once each week, but the daily task of brushing dust from his motley outfit and checking for loose threads falls to him alone. This maintenance work takes place in the same alcove where he retreats after morning performances, his movements automatic and meditative as he works his way through each piece of clothing. The repeated motion of brushing fabric, examining seams, and tightening loose threads creates a rhythm that Edmund finds oddly calming, even as his mind wanders to other concerns. Sometimes he finds himself thinking about his life before becoming a jester, when he worked as an apprentice to a traveling tinker, learning to repair pots and sharpen knives in village markets throughout the countryside. Those earlier years seem almost dreamlike now, filled with the constant variety of new places, new faces, and new challenges that came with life on the road. The tinker who trained him, an elderly man named Geoffrey, had possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of practical solutions to everyday problems, and could repair almost anything made of metal with tools that fit in a leather satchel no larger than Edmund's current costume bag. Geoffrey's death from a fever contracted during an unusually wet spring had left Edmund alone on the road with skills that were useful, but not quite sufficient to support an independent livelihood. The transition from tinker's apprentice to castle jester had happened gradually, through a series of small compromises and practical necessities rather than any grand decision or calling. Edmund had discovered that his knack for fixing things extended to fixing people's moods, that his experience reading the needs of potential customers in village markets had prepared him to read the entertainment preferences of castle residents. What had begun as occasional performances in exchange for meals and lodging had slowly transformed into a permanent position, though he sometimes wonders if permanent is the right word for a role that feels so fundamentally unstable. The evening meal represents the most elaborate performance of Edmund's day, taking place when the great hall is filled with the largest number of people, and when expectations for entertainment are at their highest. The lord's family occupies the high table at one end of the hall, while the various ranks of castle residents and guests arrange themselves at long tables that stretch the length of the room. Torches mounted in iron brackets along the walls create a warm, flickering light that transforms the hall's daytime functionality into something that feels more ceremonial and dramatic. Edmund's evening routine must be carefully choreographed to provide entertainment throughout the meal without interfering with the serious business of eating and conversation. He begins with what he calls entrance entertainment, a series of simple juggling tricks performed while people are still settling into their seats and before the serious eating begins. The familiar rhythm of catching and throwing gives his hands something to do while his eyes survey the room, taking note of who is present, what the general mood seems to be, and whether there are any visitors who might require special consideration in his performance choices. The evening entertainment progresses through several distinct phases, each requiring Edmund to adjust his energy and approach to match the changing rhythm of the meal. As the first course is served, typically a thick pottage made from whatever grains and vegetables are seasonally available, Edmund moves through the hall with quiet, observational humor, making gentle comments about the food, the weather, or the small domestic events that everyone in the castle community shares. His voice during these opening remarks is deliberately soft, requiring people to pause their conversations momentarily to listen, creating small pockets of shared attention throughout the large room. The second phase of evening entertainment coincides with the serving of the main course, usually roasted meat when supplies permit, or more elaborate preparations of vegetables and grains during the frequent periods when meat is scarce. During this portion of the meal, Edmund tells longer stories that can continue while people eat, tales that unfold slowly and require minimal audience participation. These stories often feature recurring characters that the castle residents have come to know over months and years. The bumbling merchant Aldrich, who never quite learns from his mistakes. The wise but eccentric hermit, Brother Francis, who lives in an imaginary forest, and the family of talking ravens who serve as messengers between various fictional kingdoms. The familiar characters in Edmund's stories serve a function similar to that of old friends, providing comfort through their predictable qualities while still allowing for new adventures and situations. Brother Francis, for example, always solves problems through patient observation and unconventional thinking, but the specific problems he encounters vary from story to story, giving Edmund flexibility to comment indirectly on current events in the castle or broader world. The merchant Aldrich's consistent pattern of optimistic misjudgments allows Edmund to explore themes of hope, disappointment, and resilience in ways that feel entertaining rather than preachy. During the serving of the final course, often dried fruits, nuts, or simple sweet preparations when available, Edmund transitions to more interactive entertainment that encourages audience participation without requiring anyone to leave their seats. This might involve riddles that table groups can discuss among themselves, simple singing where he provides verses and others can join in on familiar refrains, or storytelling games where he begins a tale and others contribute details or suggest directions for the plot to follow. These interactive portions of the evening entertainment require Edmund to demonstrate considerable skill in managing group dynamics, ensuring that participation remains voluntary and comfortable for everyone involved. Some castle residents, particularly visiting merchants or pilgrims, may feel shy about joining in, while others, especially after consuming the castle's ale, may become overly enthusiastic in their contributions. Edmund has learned to guide these interactions with subtle humor and gentle redirection, maintaining an atmosphere where everyone feels welcome to participate or simply observe as their comfort level dictates. The conclusion of the evening meal marks the end of Edmund's formal performance duties, but not necessarily the end of his working day. Castle residents often linger in the great hall after eating, engaging in conversations, games of dice or chess, and informal socializing that can continue until late in the evening. Edmund's role during these post-meal hours is less defined but equally important. He must remain available to provide entertainment if requested, while also knowing when to fade into the background and allow people to enjoy each other's company, without the artificial enhancement of organized entertainment. These evening hours reveal some of the more subtle challenges of Edmund's position within the castle hierarchy. He is neither servant nor guest, neither family member nor stranger, but occupies an ambiguous social space that requires constant navigation. When the Lord's brother visits and brings news from court, Edmund must gauge whether his presence during the subsequent discussions would be welcome or intrusive. When young knights gather around the fire to share stories of their training and adventures, he must decide whether attempting to join their conversation would be seen as friendly interest or inappropriate presumption that the gradual emptying of the great hall as people retire to their sleeping quarters provides Edmund with his first real solitude since dawn, though even this quiet time carries responsibilities. He must ensure that the torches are properly extinguished, that any valuable items left behind during the evening's activities are secured, and that the hall is prepared for the servants who will arrive before dawn to begin cleaning and preparation for the next day's activities. These tasks, performed in the growing darkness with only a single candle for illumination, have a meditative quality that Edmund has come to appreciate as a transition between his public role and his private self. Walking through the empty grate hall by candlelight transforms the familiar space into something mysterious and contemplative. The dancing flame creates moving shadows that seem to populate the room with ghostly presences, while the stone walls seem to absorb and reflect the small sounds of Edmund's movements in ways that make the vast space feel both intimate and infinite. During these quiet minutes, he sometimes allows himself to imagine what the hall might have witnessed over the centuries, the celebrations and sorrows, the important decisions and trivial conversations, the countless meals shared by people whose names are now forgotten. Edmund's sleeping quarters consist of a small room that he shares with two other castle servants, Thomas, the assistant cook, and Martin, who tends the castle's horses. The room contains 3 simple beds made from wooden frames supporting straw mattresses, with rough woolen blankets that provide adequate warmth during all but the coldest winter nights. A single small window provides ventilation and a modest amount of natural light during daytime hours, while a wooden shelf holds the few personal possessions that each man owns. The evening conversations among these 3 roommates follow patterns that have developed over the years they have shared this space. Thomas usually falls asleep quickly after the long day in the kitchen, his quiet snoring providing a steady rhythm that the other 2 have learned to find comforting rather than disturbing. Martin often lies awake longer, sometimes sharing quiet observations about the horses under his care, their individual personalities, and the small dramas of stable life that parallel the human relationships within the castle walls. These bedtime conversations represent perhaps the most honest social interaction in Edmund's daily life, the only time when he can drop the cheerful demeanor required of a jester and speak about his genuine thoughts and feelings. Martin and Thomas, both men who understand the particular challenges of service positions that require constant availability and good humor, provide a sympathetic audience for concerns that Edmund cannot share with anyone else in the castle community. Sometimes, their conversations touch on practical matters, concerns about aging parents in distant villages, questions about whether their current positions provide sufficient security for the future, or speculation about what opportunities might exist elsewhere for men with their particular skills. Other nights they discuss more philosophical questions that arise from their daily observations of castle life, the nature of loyalty, the relationship between genuine friendship and professional obligation, or the ways that people maintain hope and humor despite the many uncertainties and hardships that define medieval existence. The rhythm of falling asleep in the shared room has become as familiar to Edmund as any other aspect of his daily routine. He lies on his back, listening to the gradual change in his roommates' breathing as they transition from wakefulness to sleep, while his own mind slowly releases its grip on the day's concerns and performances. The straw in his mattress makes soft rustling sounds when he shifts position, and the wooden frame of his bed creaks gently under his weight, sounds that have become so associated with rest and comfort that they now serve as cues for his body to begin relaxing toward sleep. During the transition between wakefulness and sleep, Edmund's mind often wanders through memories of his performances from the day, not in a critical or analytical way, but with a detached observation of someone, reviewing events that now belong to the past. He might remember the particular way young Thomas laughed at the story about the confused dragon, or notice in retrospect how the visiting merchant's polite smile never quite reached his eyes, or recall the moment when Sister Catherine looked up from her herb garden and nodded approvingly at something she saw in his alcove window. These drowsy recollections blend gradually with more distant memories and eventually with the beginning fragments of dreams, creating a gentle transition that Edmund has learned to navigate without resistance. Sometimes he dreams about his former life as a tinker's apprentice, walking along country roads with Jeffrey, and learning to read the needs and moods of people encountered in village markets. Other times his dreams feature the familiar characters from his stories, Brother Francis, the merchant Aldrich, and the talking ravens, engaged in adventures that his waking mind has never consciously invented. The winter months bring significant changes to Edmund's daily routine, though the basic structure of morning, midday, and evening performances remains constant. The Great Hall becomes the primary living space for most castle residents during the coldest months, with people gathering around the massive fireplace for warmth as much as for social interaction. The flickering firelight creates a more intimate atmosphere for Edmund's performances, though it also means that his audience is more captive and potentially more critical of entertainment that fails to meet their expectations. Winter storytelling sessions often extend longer than their summer counterparts, partly because people have more time available and partly because the shared experience of being confined together creates a greater appreciation for activities that help pass the long, dark hours. Edmund finds that his audience during winter months is more receptive to complex, multi-part stories that can continue across several evenings, allowing him to develop characters and plots in greater depth than the abbreviated entertainment required. During busier seasons, the physical challenges of winter add another layer of difficulty to Edmund's work, as the stone floors become painfully cold and the drafty castle interior requires him to maintain his energy level, despite the body's natural tendency to conserve warmth. His morning preparation routine expands to include additional layers of clothing under his jester's costume, and he must warm his hands thoroughly before attempting juggling routines that require precise coordination. The leather balls he uses for juggling become stiff and less responsive in cold weather, requiring adjustments to his timing and technique. Spring brings a gradual transformation to castle life that Edmund experiences through subtle changes in his daily routines and the expectations of his audience. The Great Hall becomes less central to daily life as people begin spending more time in courtyards, gardens, and other outdoor spaces that have been largely abandoned during the winter months. This shift requires Edmund to adapt his performance style to accommodate audiences that are often distracted by the novelty of fresh air, budding plants, and the increased activity that comes with warmer weather and longer daylight hours. Morning performances during spring months must compete with the sound of birds returning from their winter migrations, their enthusiastic singing creating a natural soundtrack that sometimes overwhelms Edmund's carefully modulated speaking voice. He learns to incorporate these seasonal sounds into his routines, pausing his stories to comment on particularly melodious bird songs or using the rhythm of chirping sparrows as timing cues for his juggling sequences. The integration of natural sounds into his performances creates a more organic feeling to his entertainment, though it also requires greater flexibility and improvisational skill. The castle's gardens become active again during spring, with Sister Catherine expanding her herb cultivation and several castle residents taking up small plots for growing vegetables to supplement the communal food stores. Edmund often finds himself drawn to watch this gardening activity during his afternoon rest periods, observing the careful attention that people pay to soil preparation, seed planting, and the daily maintenance required to nurture new growth. There is something deeply satisfying about witnessing this hopeful forward-looking activity after the long months of winter's enforced patience and conservation. The seasonal cycle of planting, tending, and eventual harvesting provides Edmund with a metaphor that he begins incorporating into his stories, creating tales about characters who must learn patience, persistence, and the art of caring for things that grow slowly and require consistent attention. The story of the impatient farmer who keeps digging up his seeds to check whether they are growing becomes a favorite among the castle children, while the adults appreciate the more subtle tale of the gardener who discovers that talking to his plants helps them grow stronger, though he is never quite sure whether the benefit comes from his words or from the extra attention that talking requires him to pay to each individual plant. Spring also brings an increase in traveling visitors to the castle as roads become passable again, and people resume the journeys that were postponed during winter months. These visitors create both opportunities and challenges for Edmund's work, as they represent new audiences for his familiar routines, while also bringing expectations based on entertainment they may have encountered in other places. A merchant who has recently returned from London may have heard professional minstrels whose skill far exceeds Edmund's amateur abilities, while a pilgrim traveling to a distant shrine may be more interested in spiritual contemplation than worldly. Entertainment.Edmund learns to read these visitors quickly, gauging their receptiveness to different types of performance and adjusting his approach accordingly. The merchant who seems impatient with simple juggling tricks may appreciate more sophisticated wordplay or riddles that demonstrate cleverness rather than just manual dexterity. The pilgrim who appears uncomfortable with secular entertainment may respond better to stories that incorporate moral lessons or philosophical reflections, even when delivered in an entertaining format. The increased diversity of his audience during spring and summer months helps Edmund develop new material and refine his performance skills, though it also creates additional pressure to maintain high standards and avoid the complacency that can develop when entertaining the same people day after day. A routine that has worked perfectly for months with the familiar castle residents may fall completely flat with visitors who approach it without the context of shared experience and mutual understanding that develops within a stable community. Summer brings the busiest period of Edmund's year, with the castle hosting more visitors, organizing more elaborate meals, and generally maintaining a higher level of social activity that requires correspondingly more entertainment. The long daylight hours extend his working day as people remain active and social well into the evening hours that would be devoted to sleep during winter months. Edmund finds himself performing not just at the three main meals, but also during mid-morning refreshments, afternoon gatherings in the courtyard, and late evening socializing that can continue until nearly midnight. The physical demands of this increased performance schedule begin to take their toll as Edmund ages, though he develops strategies for managing his energy and maintaining the appearance of enthusiasm, even when his body feels the strain of constant activity. He learns to pace his performances throughout the day, saving his most energetic routines for times when they will have the greatest impact and relying on quieter, more contemplative entertainment during periods when his audience is likely to be less demanding. The summer heat creates its own set of challenges, as Edmund's layered costume becomes uncomfortably warm during the hottest parts of the day. and the great hall can become stifling when filled with people and lit by numerous torches. He develops a modified version of his standard costume for summer use, with lighter fabrics and fewer layers, though he must be careful to maintain the visual elements that people expect from a jester's appearance. The balance between comfort and professional presentation requires constant adjustment and compromise. The abundance of fresh food during summer months creates opportunities for Edmund to incorporate seasonal references into his stories and jokes, with tales about characters who overindulge in fresh fruit, farmers who struggle with the embarrassment of riches that comes from particularly successful harvests, and the various comedic situations that arise when people who have lived on preserved foods all winter suddenly have access to a variety of fresh flavors and textures. Autumn represents a period of intense preparation activity throughout the castle, as everyone works to preserve food, repair buildings, and complete various projects before winter weather makes such work difficult or impossible. Edmund's role during this busy season requires him to provide entertainment that does not distract from essential work, while also offering the kind of mental relief that helps people maintain their energy and enthusiasm for the demanding tasks of preparation and preservation. His autumn performances often take place in work settings rather than formal entertainment venues, with Edmund providing commentary and gentle humor while people engage in activities like food preservation, textile work, and equipment maintenance. The challenge of entertaining people whose attention is primarily focused on their work requires Edmund to develop a more subtle, less intrusive performance style that can enhance the working atmosphere without disrupting the rhythm and concentration. That productive work requires that the gradual shortening of daylight hours during autumn creates a natural transition back toward the more intimate, indoor-focused entertainment that will dominate the winter months. Edmund begins incorporating stories about preparation, foresight, and the wisdom of accepting seasonal changes rather than resisting them. The tale of the grasshopper who learns to appreciate the ant's methodical approach to winter preparation becomes a seasonal favorite, though Edmund's version emphasizes the value of different approaches to life's challenges rather than simply criticizing those who prefer spontaneity to planning. The annual cycle of seasonal changes provides Edmund with a framework for understanding his own aging and the gradual evolution of his relationship with his work and his role within the castle. Community. Each year brings small changes in his physical abilities, his repertoire of stories and routines, and his understanding of what his audience wants and needs from his performances. The accumulation of these small changes over multiple years creates a sense of personal growth and development that helps compensate for the repetitive nature of his daily work. Edmund begins to notice that his memory for stories has improved significantly over the years, allowing him to maintain larger repertoires of tales and to weave connections between different stories that create a sense of ongoing narrative continuity. His understanding of timing has become more sophisticated, enabling him to read his audience's mood and energy level with greater accuracy and to adjust his pacing accordingly. His physical coordination has reached a level where juggling and other manual skills require minimal conscious attention, freeing his mind to focus on other aspects of his performance. These gradual improvements in his professional abilities provide Edmund with a sense of satisfaction and accomplishment that helps counterbalance the routine and sometimes tedious aspects of his work. He begins to see himself not just as someone who happens to work as a jester, but as someone who has developed genuine expertise in the art of entertainment and communication. This shift in self-perception influences how he approaches his daily tasks, bringing a sense of professional pride to work that he once viewed primarily as a means of survival. The development of expertise also brings increased responsibility, as newer servants and occasional visitors begin seeking his advice about performance techniques, storytelling methods, and strategies for reading and managing audience reactions. Edmund finds himself in the unexpected role of informal mentor, sharing knowledge and techniques that he has accumulated through years of daily practice and observation. This teaching role provides him with a new perspective on his own work, as explaining techniques to others requires him to analyze and articulate skills that he has previously performed intuitively. The mentoring relationship also creates connections with younger people in the castle community that extend beyond his formal role as entertainer. Young servants who are learning to navigate the complex social dynamics of castle life often seek his guidance on matters that have little to do with entertainment, but everything to do with reading people, managing relationships, and maintaining personal dignity while serving others. Edmund discovers that many of the skills required for successful entertainment translate directly to other aspects of social interaction and communication. As the years pass, and Edmund's hair begins to show gray streaks and his joints begin to protest more vigorously against the physical demands of his work, he starts to contemplate questions about the future that he has long avoided considering. The life of a castle jester does not typically include provisions for retirement or alternative employment, and Edmund must begin planning for a time when his physical abilities may no longer support the demands of daily performance. These contemplations about the future lead Edmund to pay closer attention to the older servants within the castle community, observing how they have managed the transition from active work to reduced responsibilities while maintaining their dignity and their place within the social structure. Old William, who once served as the castle's primary groom but now focuses on training younger men while handling lighter duties, provides a model for graceful aging within his service role. Sister Catherine, despite her advanced years, continues to tend her herb garden but has gradually shifted toward teaching and advisory roles rather than performing all the physical labor herself. Edmund begins to consider how his own role might evolve over time, perhaps transitioning from daily performances to special occasions, or from active entertainment to storytelling and teaching younger performers. The prospect of change creates both anxiety and relief anxiety about the uncertainty of altering a routine that has provided security and identity for so many years, but relief at the possibility of reducing the physical demands that have begun to strain his aging body. The gradual nature of this transition allows Edmund to experiment with different approaches to his work, incorporating more seated storytelling and less physically demanding routines into his daily performances. He discovers that his audience responds well to these changes, particularly the longer, more detailed stories that his years of experience have taught him to craft with greater sophistication and emotional depth. The children especially seem to appreciate tales that unfold over multiple sessions, creating ongoing narratives that give them something to Anticipate and remember. This evolution in his storytelling approach leads Edmund to develop what becomes his most ambitious project, a series of interconnected tales about a fictional kingdom where all the inhabitants face challenges similar to those encountered in real castle life, but where these challenges are resolved through cooperation, creativity, and mutual understanding rather than through conflict or dominance. The kingdom in Edmund's stories becomes a place where the wise old gardener works alongside the young, ambitious knight, where the practical cook collaborates with the dreamy scholar, and where problems are solved through the combined efforts of people with different skills and perspectives. The creation of this fictional kingdom provides Edmund with a vehicle for exploring themes and ideas that would be difficult to address directly in his role as castle entertainer. Through the adventures of his imaginary characters, he can comment on issues of social justice, the importance of treating all people with dignity regardless of their station, and the ways that communities can work together to overcome challenges that would be impossible for individuals to handle alone. The indirect nature of these messages, delivered through entertaining stories rather than sermons or lectures, allows his audience to consider new ideas without feeling pressured or criticized. The development of this extended narrative cycle also provides Edmund with a sense of creative fulfillment that goes beyond the immediate satisfaction of successful daily performances. He begins to see his work not just as entertainment, but as a form of cultural contribution, creating stories that will be remembered and perhaps retold long after his own performing days have ended. This shift in perspective transforms his relationship with his work from one of obligation and routine to one of artistic purpose and legacy creation. The fictional kingdom stories become popular throughout the castle community, with people often requesting updates on particular characters or asking Edmund to revisit certain episodes that they especially enjoyed. This audience engagement provides Edmund with feedback that helps him refine his storytelling techniques and develop plot lines that resonate most strongly with his listeners. He learns to weave current events and seasonal changes into his fictional narratives, creating stories that feel both timeless and immediately relevant to his audience's daily experiences. As Edmund's reputation as a storyteller grows, he begins receiving invitations to perform at special occasions in neighboring castles and villages, opportunities that provide him with new audiences and fresh perspectives on his work. These traveling performances require him to adapt his familiar stories to different social contexts and cultural expectations, challenges that help him develop greater flexibility and cultural sensitivity in his approach to entertainment. Experience of performing for unfamiliar audiences also helps Edmund understand how much his regular work has been shaped by his deep knowledge of the castle community's personalities, relationships, and shared experiences. Stories that work perfectly for people who have lived together for years may need significant modification when told to strangers who lack the contextual understanding that comes from shared daily life. This realization leads Edmund to develop more universal versions of his favorite tales, stories that can succeed with any audience while still maintaining their essential messages and entertainment value. The travel opportunities also expose Edmund to different approaches to entertainment and storytelling, as he encounters other performers and learns about techniques and traditions that have developed in different regions and communities. A traveling minstrel might demonstrate a new style of audience interaction, while a village storyteller might share a tale that Edmund can adapt for his own use. These encounters help prevent his work from becoming too insular and provide him with fresh material and inspiration for his ongoing creative development. However, the physical demands of travel become increasingly challenging as Edmund ages, and he finds himself preferring the familiar comfort and routine of his home castle to the uncertainties and discomforts of life on the road. The soft bed he has slept in for years, the familiar faces of his audiences, and the predictable rhythm of daily castle life begin to feel more precious as he recognizes how much energy it takes to constantly adapt to new environments and expectations. This growing appreciation for the stability and community that his castle position provides leads Edmund to a deeper understanding of the value of the life he has built, despite its limitations and challenges. He begins to see his daily work not as a series of repetitive tasks, but as an ongoing contribution to the well-being and happiness of a community that has become his family. The morning performances that once felt routine now seem like daily gifts that he offers to people who have shared years of their lives with him. The relationships that have developed over years of shared daily life reveal their depth and significance when viewed from this perspective. The Lord's children, who have grown from toddlers to young adults during Edmund's tenure, represent a kind of extended family connection that transcends the formal boundaries of his employment. The fellow servants who have shared meals, conversations, and sleeping quarters with him have become intimate friends whose well-being matters to him as much as his own. Sister Catherine, now in her 70s but still tending her herb garden, with careful attention, has become a particular source of wisdom and comfort for Edmund. Their occasional conversations about the challenges of aging, the satisfaction of work well done, and the importance of finding meaning in daily routine provide him with perspective and encouragement during moments when his own future seems uncertain. Her example of graceful aging and continued contribution to community life offers him a model for his own later years. The seasonal rhythms that have structured Edmund's work for so many years begin to feel like natural patterns that connect him to larger cycles of growth, maturity, and renewal. The annual return of spring, with its promise of new growth and fresh beginnings, provides him with hope and energy for facing another year of challenges and opportunities. The abundance of summer reminds him of the importance of enjoying good times fully while they last. The preparation activities of autumn reinforce the wisdom of planning and the value of community cooperation, while the quiet contemplation of winter offers opportunities for reflection and renewal. These seasonal patterns help Edmund understand that his own aging and the gradual changes in his abilities and role are part of natural processes that affect all living things. Rather than fighting against these changes or mourning the loss of his younger self's energy and capabilities, he begins to embrace the particular gifts and opportunities that come with each stage of life. His years of experience have given him wisdom, patience, and understanding that his younger self could not have possessed, qualities that enhance his storytelling and deepen his connection with his audience. The recognition that his work has meaning and value beyond its immediate entertainment function provides Edmund with a sense of purpose that sustains him through the more difficult aspects of his daily routine. When his knees ache from sitting on stone floors, when his voice grows hoarse from constant talking, or when he struggles to find enthusiasm for performances that feel overly familiar, he reminds himself that his work contributes to the happiness and well-being of people he cares about, and that this contribution justifies the effort and sacrifice required to maintain his professional standards. This deeper understanding of his work's significance also influences how Edmund approaches his daily performances, bringing greater intentionality and mindfulness to routines that might otherwise become mechanical. He begins to pay closer attention to individual audience members, noticing when someone seems particularly troubled or when a child appears to need extra attention and encouragement. His performances become more responsive to the immediate needs and moods of his audience, creating a more dynamic and personally meaningful form of entertainment. The development of this more personalized approach to his work requires Edmund to maintain greater awareness and sensitivity during his performances, but it also provides him with more satisfaction and engagement in his daily activities. Rather than simply delivering familiar routines, he finds himself creating unique experiences that respond to the specific circumstances and needs of each day's audience. This approach transforms his work from repetitive task performance to creative problem-solving and human connection. As Edmund's understanding of his work deepens, he begins to notice subtleties in human behavior and emotion that had previously escaped his attention. The way a particular night's laughter changes when he receives letters from home reveals homesickness that the man would never admit directly. The manner in which one of the serving women pauses during his stories suggests a capacity for imagination and reflection that her daily duties rarely allow her to express. These observations help Edmund tailor his performances to provide not just general entertainment, but specific moments of connection and understanding that address individual needs within his audience. This heightened awareness of his audience's emotional landscape transforms Edmund's evening performances into something approaching pastoral care, though he would never use such formal terminology to describe his work. When he notices that the castle steward appears particularly burdened by responsibilities, Edmund might include stories about characters who learn to delegate tasks and trust others to share important work. When the lord's wife seems melancholy after receiving news from her distant family, he might offer tales about the enduring power of love and connection across great distances. The subtlety required for this approach demands considerable skill and sensitivity, as Edmund must address people's emotional needs without making them feel exposed or uncomfortable. The indirect nature of storytelling allows him to offer comfort and perspective while maintaining the entertainment framework. That keeps his interventions from feeling intrusive or presumptuous. A story about a fictional character's struggle with loneliness can provide solace to someone experiencing similar feelings without requiring them to acknowledge their vulnerability publicly. This evolution in Edmund's approach to his work creates a feedback loop that enhances his own emotional well-being and sense of purpose. As he becomes more attentive to others' needs and more skilled at providing meaningful responses through his entertainment, he experiences greater satisfaction and connection in his daily work. The routine tasks that once felt repetitive and draining now feel like opportunities for creative problem-solving and genuine human service The changing nature of his work also influences Edmund's relationships with his fellow servants and the broader castle community. People begin seeking him out, not just for entertainment, but for the kind of gentle counsel and perspective that his years of observation and storytelling have equipped him to provide. These informal counseling conversations usually take place during his rest periods, or while he maintains his costume and equipment, creating a natural, non-threatening context for people to share concerns and seek advice. Edmund discovers that many of the skills he has developed as a performer, listening carefully, reading emotional cues, finding the right tone and timing for communication, translate directly to these more serious conversations. His experience crafting stories that explore complex human situations has given him a repertoire of metaphors and analogies that help people understand their own experiences from new perspectives. His practice in managing group dynamics during performances has taught him how to help people feel heard and valued, even when he cannot solve their problems directly. These expanded responsibilities within the castle community provide Edmund with a sense of importance and usefulness that goes far beyond entertainment value. He begins to see himself as a keeper of community emotional health, someone whose work contributes to the overall well-being and harmony of the people who live and work within the castle walls. This broader understanding of his role helps him find meaning and satisfaction in even the most routine aspects of his daily work. The gradual recognition of his contributions to community life also influences how others perceive and treat Edmund. The Lord begins consulting him informally about the morale and concerns of the castle's residents, recognizing that Edmund's daily interactions with everyone from knights to kitchen servants provide him with unique insights into the community's emotional climate. The lady of the castle occasionally requests his advice about entertainment for special occasions, acknowledging his expertise in understanding what different audiences enjoy and need. These subtle changes in his status within the castle hierarchy provide Edmund with greater security and confidence about his future. Rather than worrying about losing his position due to age or changing circumstances, he begins to envision a role that could evolve and adapt while continuing to provide value to the community that has become his home. The prospect of becoming an elder advisor and storyteller, someone whose wisdom and experience are valued even as his physical capabilities decline, offers him a vision of aging with dignity and continued purpose. The seasonal cycle continues to provide structure and meaning to Edmund's life, but now each season brings not just familiar routines, but opportunities for deeper engagement with the ongoing stories and relationships that define his community. Spring arrivals of new servants or visiting family members provide him with opportunities to help newcomers understand and adapt to castle life. Summer's increased social activity allows him to facilitate connections between people who might not otherwise interact meaningfully. Autumn's preparation activities give him chances to share the practical wisdom he has accumulated over years of castle living. Winter's quiet months have become Edmund's favorite time for developing new stories and reflecting on the year's experiences. The long evenings by the fire provide ideal conditions for crafting the complex, multi-layered tales that have become his specialty. While the intimate atmosphere of people gathered together for warmth creates perfect audiences for stories that explore deeper themes of human connection, resilience, and hope. During one particularly peaceful winter evening, as Edmund sits in his familiar alcove watching the snow fall softly outside his small window, he reflects on the unexpected path his life has taken. The young man who once dreamed of traveling the countryside as an independent tinker could never have imagined finding such satisfaction and meaning in the daily routine of castle entertainment. The work that once seemed like a temporary solution to economic necessity has become a calling that provides him with purpose, community, and a sense of contribution to something larger than himself. The herb garden below his window lies dormant, under its blanket of snow, but Edmund knows that beneath the frozen surface, the roots of Sister Catherine's plants remain alive, waiting for spring's warmth to awaken new growth. This image provides him with a metaphor for his own life. The apparent quietness and routine of his daily existence conceals ongoing growth, deepening relationships, and the gradual accumulation of wisdom and skill that will continue to bear fruit in seasons yet to come. As the evening's final performance concludes and the great hall gradually empties, Edmund extinguishes the torches with his usual careful attention to safety. But tonight he pauses longer than usual to appreciate the peaceful atmosphere that settles over the space when the day's activities end. The stone walls that have witnessed countless meals, conversations, celebrations, and quiet moments seem to hold within them the accumulated warmth of all the human connections they have sheltered. Walking to his sleeping quarters by candlelight, Edmund feels the deep satisfaction that comes from a day's work well done and a life lived with attention to both duty and compassion. His roommates Thomas and Martin are already asleep, their steady breathing creating the familiar soundtrack that has marked the end of his days for so many years. As he settles into his simple bed, feeling the gentle embrace of his warm blankets, and listening to the comfortable creaking of the wooden frame, Edmund allows his mind to drift through the day's small victories and satisfactions. The successful morning performance that brought genuine laughter to the Lord's children, the afternoon story session that seemed to comfort a homesick young servant, the evening's entertainment that helped bring together visitors and residents. In shared enjoyment, these achievements, though modest, represent meaningful contributions to the happiness and well-being of his community. The gradual recognition that his work matters, that his presence makes a difference in people's lives, fills Edmund with a quiet contentment that no amount of gold or grand adventure could provide. As sleep approaches, Edmund's thoughts become dreamier and more fragmented, blending memories of the day with anticipations of tomorrow's opportunities, and echoes of stories told and retold over years of performance. The familiar characters from his tales, Brother Francis with his patient wisdom, the merchant Aldrich with his optimistic persistence, and the talking ravens with their messages of connection across distances, seem to gather around his bed like old friends, their imagined presence providing comfort and companionship as consciousness fades into rest. The castle around him settles into its own nighttime rhythm, with the soft sounds of people sleeping, the occasional creak of ancient timbers, and the gentle whisper of wind through stone corridors, creating a lullaby that speaks of safety, continuity, and belonging. In this peaceful environment, surrounded by the community that has become his family and sustained by work that provides both purpose and satisfaction, Edmund drifts into sleep with the deep contentment that comes from a life lived with attention to both personal growth and service to others. And so our gentle jester rests, his daily journey complete, his contributions to his community's happiness and well-being woven into the fabric of countless ordinary moments that, taken together, create the extraordinary tapestry of a meaningful life. Let yourself now settle even more deeply into your own comfortable resting place, feeling the same sense of peaceful completion that Edmund experiences as each day's work draws to its natural close. Allow your breathing to slow and deepen, matching the rhythm of rest that settles over the ancient castle, where generations of people have found safety, community, and the quiet satisfaction that comes from work well done and connections faithfully maintained. Feel yourself becoming part of this timeless pattern of daily effort, followed by restorative sleep, where tomorrow's opportunities rest waiting like seeds beneath winter snow, ready to grow into new moments of purpose, connection, and gentle contribution to the ongoing story of human community and care.